Excellent. Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much to everyone watching this or everyone attending. My name's Ellie Hutchinson, and I'm really pleased to be hosting this workshop, pre-recorded input about how you can think about different ways to use creativity to tell your story about how you helped during COVID. So just a bit of background about the project. So this is part of the Together We Help project. Which is really interested in what people did to help during the pandemic and what Scotland can learn going forward. And so we're doing community research, so people from communities going into the communities to hear what happened and to learn from that. And then the other part of what we're doing is looking at kind of creative outputs, which is what this session is all about. So when we talk about creative outputs, we're thinking about different ways that you can share what you did and what Scotland can learn from it. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Fin here, who's going to share a little bit about storytelling and thinking creatively about different ways to talk about what you did and what we can learn from it. So Fin's from Ireland Live Productions, and they produce films, soundscapes, theatre pieces and installations. And I am a freelancer working on social justice issues, and I like to use a lot of different creative ways to hear from folk about what's going on for them. So I'll first talk about some of the different things that you can do to tell your story, and then I'll hand over to Fin and he can tell you a little bit about some of his ideas about how you can tell your story. So my kind of preferred way when I'm thinking about like different creative ways to tell stories is really think about like household objects. So what have you got in your house that you can use? It doesn't cost much money. You can just pick up and find it. And I'm a mum of 2 small children, so I always have stick and I always have scissors and I always have craft materials and I always have Lego. So this is really what I'm going to be talking about, how we can use these sort of everyday objects to tell our stories. And this is something that I like to use called zining. It's essentially collaging, but zines are kind of magazines, they're sort of DIY magazines that you can put together at home using whatever kind of materials you've got to hand. So we need our scissors and our Pritt stick, pieces of paper that you can just, normally zines are kind of this size, but you can do them however big you like. And you really can use anything. So I've just got a bunch of junk mail here. I've got a Tesco magazine, and it's essentially how you make a zine is think about what you want to tell people about what you did and flick through it and cut it out and stick it down. And it's that simple. And the beauty of zines is that they can be really scrappy, not look very good, because that's kind of part of their appeal, which is why I like them. So I did a zine last night to talk about using a kind of case study of somebody who set up a WhatsApp group in their street and delivered food shopping to their neighbours. So just flicking through some of the magazines that I had at home. So I had Grazia, Wired and Empire. So using these 3 magazines. So I've got 2020, A New Modern Horror, But We Begin, Random Acts of Community. So it's really scrappy, as you can see, and these are just taken through these different magazines. And I didn't sort of sit there and think, this is what I want my front page to look like. I just flicked through and just cut out stuff that kind of spoke to me. And then the next page is different things that I found that kind of spoke to me about what was happening in the pandemic and around the pandemic. And things with zines as well is that you can use writing, pictures, you can cut out whole phrases or just words at a time. So here I've got an example of, I organised a WhatsApp group for my neighbours and we did food shops and helped each other out. So I found all these different things that were in these magazines. And this out of office was part of a Grazia summer 2019 bikini spread, which I felt was a bit ironic considering where we were this summer. The out of office feeling was probably quite different, so intense out of office. The job market is broken, Zoom, but also reading, money, socially distanced, phrase that we never thought we knew about until this year, and WhatsApp groups. So these things just sort of popped up to me of what kind of the context in which all this was happening. So it's really telling that story of, this is the kind of background story of what's going on in COVID, and this is kind of how we helped. And then my final page is what I want Scotland to learn from going forward, and kind of thinking about that hopefulness as well, although we're kind of heading into the winter and things are more challenging and it's, you know, taking a toll on sort of financial as well as our mental and physical health. But really to keep that hope to make change and transform to a new and different future. And then I just found things that kind of spoke to that as well. So this is my zine. And I've got some examples of things I've done before with people looking at technology, our relationship with technology. So again, somebody's just done this sort of collage-y effect. That's just things that popped into their head. Another one this sort of size. So they're kind of all different, but the thing that, and they're all made by different people, but the thing that's all the same is that they don't have to look perfect. They don't need to look polished. In fact, the great thing about zines is that I think the less polished they look, the better. They're also a really nice thing to do in groups as well. So you can do like, just give each other a theme. So if you did something together as a community and everyone put together one of these sort of pieces of paper, and then you can pull it together, and it's almost like your magazine of what you did and how you helped. So that's the zining aspect. And then the other bit that you can think about doing, I'm just going to share my screen. If I can get to it, here we go. So hopefully, just open that up. It's very smooth transitions. Hopefully you should.
Yep, we can see.
Can you see that? So that's a Lego picture of Lego. This was made, my husband made this last night, using the same scenario of we're part of a neighborhood group and we set up a WhatsApp group to help each other out. So we've got Lego houses on a street with some trees and different characters to represent our neighbors. So it's a very angry looking motorcyclist there, My Little Pony and a dinosaur.
As you do.
It's really about using whatever you've got to hand, and also not worrying about whether it looks good. That's really not the purpose of it. It's like, how do you want to express yourself? How do you want to tell your story? And what have you got lying around that you can use to help you do that? Really, really kind of simple. Don't be frightened of it not looking great, or that you're maybe not good at art stuff. Like, everyone's good at art stuff. Like, you can just cut things out and stick them down and you'll be good at it. It's really,
There's no such thing as not an artist.
yeah, exactly. And I think these tools as well are really good to use with children and young people. So you can do them at home in your families when you're talking to your kids about how they kind of got involved, or maybe what they didn't, what some of the barriers were for them in terms of helping out their neighbours. And yeah, so that's my kind of the two areas that I wanted to focus on, and just kind of share with you different ways to think about how you can tell your story. So that's mine, Lego and zining. So I'm going to pass it over to Finn to tell us a bit about his thoughts.
I don't know how to follow that up. I definitely don't have anything as exciting or illustrative to sort of show on screen. So I'm just going to do a load of talking at you guys, and hopefully you're going to find some of it interesting. So as Ellie very kindly pointed out, I run a company called Live Productions. We work with emerging artists and members of the public to create high quality art. That's our general sort of tagline. And then personally for me, within that sort of wider organizational premise, I really want to use my work to inspire people to create positive change within themselves, which is a very broad brush subject, but it, you know, gets to the bottom of, you know, what I think a lot of us hope art can do, and maybe in some cases have personally experienced how art can affect us. So this story of sort of me and the organization during COVID starts with a project called Welcome to the Quids Inn. So Live Productions was legally established about this time last year, sort of October 2019. And from the off, our sort of main launch project was going to be this fiction podcast about 5 young people who were simultaneously hired as reception staff at the Edinburgh branch of a fictional chain of budget hotels. And on the subject of telling your stories, this was something that was based off my own experiences, having been a night shift receptionist at the Edinburgh Learmonth Travel Lodge, which, if you ever go by Learmonth Terrace, is a very cute little hotel. But we worked really hard on this. Part of the Live Productions philosophy, as part of respecting the emerging artists we work with, is paying everybody who is involved in our project. So we worked really hard to fill out some funding applications, and we got £1,000 worth of funding, and I put some of my own money into it, and we got a great writer on board, a great producer on board in Ellie McKinnon and Jasmine Geisen. We got 6 amazing actors from different parts of the Edinburgh community, but all Edinburgh based, to be part of telling this story. And we built all of this momentum going into a month's worth of recording these 8 episodes in March. And then, as you can kind of see where this story is going, COVID happened. And obviously COVID was completely unexpected. And obviously it completely ravaged the production schedule. So I think March 18th is the date that I have in my head where sort of everything basically shut down, at least certainly from an arts perspective. And from a you can't go over to other people's house perspective. And that was really annoying for us, having recorded 4 of the episodes between sort of March 1st and March 10th, and then set to do the last ones towards the end of the month. And then all of a sudden it was like completely, no, can't do it, not going to happen. And it's interesting because even though obviously this was quite frustrating and annoying for me, and it created this weird situation where I didn't know what was going to happen with the project. I didn't know when we would be able to re-record again. It actually forced every arts organization to rethink what exactly they were doing, why were they doing it, and how were they doing it. We talk a lot now about the arts sector and about this sort of new normal. But is it that right now we're living in a new normal, or is it that actually this is an inevitable normal that has just sort of been accelerated to come early? But the most important thing was I had to sort of keep my head down and think, okay, we can't do anything with this other project. What are we going to do instead to represent sort of the world we're now living in? And that ended up being represented in a project that we are currently making called The Blindfold, which is going to be, once it's ready, a free to download pick your own audio adventure currently being recorded that investigates the changes and effects that COVID has had on society. And we picked this up for 2 reasons. Firstly, because it was representative of the world around us, of the changes and things that we were all experiencing. But also that for me personally, you know, sitting in my room during lockdown, looking outside the window, like desperately trying to figure out what everything that was going on meant for the future, I realized that the things that I wanted to say in this piece were things that were very urgent to say. That it wasn't just, okay, well, I might as well do something, you know, because, you know, art for the sake of art gets found out really quickly. But when there's something that, at least to you, feels like there's an urgency to get out there and express and share with people, that makes it so much more powerful, which meant that even when the restrictions lifted and we were able to finish the recordings for Welcome to the Quids Inn, and we released all the episodes, all 8 episodes of that podcast are now out and available on all good podcasting platforms. We've continued with The Blindfold, and that piece is currently being recorded, and around December will be available on Rakuten Kobo, again, free to download. But the point that I'm getting to in terms of now, and to anybody who's sort of listening to this thinking, I want to tell my story, but I don't quite know how to do it, and I don't know how I should word it, and I don't know if it's the right thing to do in the context of a world in which I can talk about my context today, but by next week and next month and in 3 months' time, that'll be completely different. And I don't normally like to sort of admit this, but I'm going to point to South Park as an example of good practice for a moment. I don't know if any of you have watched the pandemic special that they put out, but something that was really interesting about it was representative of the world around us and the things that the creators of South Park felt were very urgent to say. And that is not something that can be said about most things on TV and in the films at the moment. And for me, that was very, very powerful. And even though I'm not a big South Park fan, it meant a lot that I could look at something that felt like it was representative of my world and that could connect to me personally, even though I'm living in Edinburgh, not sort of rural Colorado. This Is Us. I don't know if any of you have seen the sort of new episodes of the new series, but that's also a really good example of a story and a plotline that has embraced the nature of what's going on around us. And I think the important thing that this teaches us, and again, this is a style choice, not everyone is going to feel this way, don't run away from the reality that we're in, because I know that it's scary, and I know that it's terrifying, and I know that some days you wake up and going and making yourself a cup of tea can feel like a bit of an effort. But as much as you can, when you're telling that story, don't run away from that reality. Embrace it. Embrace the positive elements of it, but also embrace the negative feelings of it, and embrace the pain, because that can be where a lot of the good stuff comes from. I'm going to move to talk a little bit about the fact that everything is digital at the moment. I mean, amazingly, Ellie just showed us something really, really easy that you can do that's not digital. But a lot of what Island Life Productions and what a lot of arts organizations have transitioned to in general, including this event, by the way, is the sort of the digital arts revolution. And it's important to note in the context of, your storytelling and your future, particularly if any of you are aspiring artists, this has been coming for a while. The world in which arts organizations can afford to stick to a sector is dying. And it's been dying for a while, and it's been dying very quickly. And the fact is that particularly in this sort of COVID existence, the quicker that organizations can diversify their forms of creativity, the more successful that they will be in a post-COVID world. We're already seeing that with things like Traverse 3 and the extent to which the Lyceum have tried to find ways of putting their shows online, and the extent to which arts organizations have figured out how can we do things that are digital. Glasgow School of Arts and their graduate show is another great example of this. And I know that for some of you who may not be ridiculously technically savvy, this can be quite terrifying. But actually, at the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing that I think all artists have to face, which is just play to your strengths. Just do what you know how to do. Just embrace what you're confident in. Dare to experiment, push your own boundaries, know what your strengths are, but be brave enough to try other things as well. And most importantly, don't be scared to ask for help. Nobody's an expert on everything. And if there's one thing that has allowed Island Life Productions to be successful in our first year, it's the extent to which we've talked to marketing people and talked to funding people and talked to graphic design people and gotten advice about things so that we can improve our general practice moving forward. And lastly, is some finally sort of storytelling techniques, because again, I don't know, because we can't see you in this pre-record, I don't know who you are, and I don't know specifically what you're asking for, what you're going for, but I will leave you with these prompts as you begin thinking about how to move forward. First of all, ask yourself, what is urgent to you? I've talked a lot about what's urgent to me. Ellie has talked about sort of the urgencies to her, but for you, that's not going to be different. So what is it that's urgent to you in this moment? And there are no wrong answers. So whatever you say is the answer to it, go for it. And then similarly, although maybe a different answer, what's your truth? Like, what is the thing that exists to you that is deep within your soul that you can't ignore because it's real and it's there and it's honest and it's you? And the last thing to ask yourself is, why do people need to hear it? And I say need, and I appreciate that everything can seem urgent and everything can seem like it's a hyperbole. And we're in this world in which it feels like everything is burning to the ground, particularly as we're recording this the day before the American election. But why is this important? Particularly in the context of the world right now where people are tired and people are exhausted and everybody is just trying to get by. Why is your story something that it's important for people to experience? And again, no wrong answers. Whatever you think is your answer, go with it and hold on to it. The hardest thing is finishing a first draft. So whatever you're doing, whether it's an art thing or a theater thing or a podcast thing or whatever, don't overthink it. Don't doubt yourself. Just get to the end of that first draft, make it happen, get it done. And if you need any further suggestions or further help beyond that, I am Fin, Fin, at islandlifeproductions.com. And I'm very happy to deal with any sort of specific help or advice or stuff with projects. And we're always looking for people to work with. So yeah, just get in touch. Don't be strangers.
Right. Thank you so much, Fin. Really interesting. And I think that what you were saying there about like the urgency of telling your story is really, really important. So like everyone who's taken part in this project have been doing something that really was very reactive. They responded very urgently to their need in their communities. So, and we do have a need in our society to hear those stories. Like, we all can benefit and learn from them. And I think the tricky bit is that, as you rightly said, like, everyone's tired, everyone's feeling really worn down by it all. So I feel like for me, putting together that sort of zine thing last night was really therapeutic, actually, just sitting there thinking about stuff in a way that gives you space to kind of digest it and reflect on it, and also keep looking forward and keep moving forward, and think of that hopefulness of, we have learned so much about each other and our communities in our places of vulnerability and in our places of fear. And so sometimes when we're in those really awful moments of like loss and hopelessness, it's a really good opportunity for kind of rebirth and regrowth. So how do we kind of tell that story in an honest way? And I think that's what I'd want to share for folk as well. When you're thinking about, you've got a story, you want to tell it, but you're worried because there's a vulnerability element there of like, what if you get it wrong, or what if it's not like good? And like, bin that idea. Like, it'll be great because you've done something great already. And just showing up, and as Fin said, like, do your first draft and just give it a go. And if there's stuff that interests you, whether it's like, podcasts or audio recordings or cutting and pasting or Lego or whatever it is, taking photos of your experience, just give it a go. And whatever support you need, like, we can help you figure out what that looks like as well. So thank you very much. Thank you for listening. I'm just going to turn us off record now. and again, if you need anything, get in touch with either of us and we'll be more than happy to help. So thank you so much. Thank you.